Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Rise of the GM podcast. We are here today with a special guest, Eric Bright. We're going to talk about role facilitated gaming, single player gaming, and a whole lot more. Stick with us here on Rise of the GM. Man alive, guys. I am like all over the place. I missed my beginning intro where I come in. Usually I'm sitting there watching it. I'm like, oh, wait, I'm the one who's supposed to talk there. We are super excited to have a friend with us, a co-host, Eric Bright. Eric Bright, I will tell you, was probably doing this. I know he was doing this longer than me. I'll let him talk about whether he was doing this longer than Adam. He was one of the first people I ever saw. When I did my first gaming with Adam, Eric was there along with a couple other people we know. So Eric, welcome to the show. And Eric, by the way, I'm going to let him tell you where he's from and kind of what he's doing, but he also wanted to make a little clear up comment about something we said in the past. And I'm going to let him do that right here at the beginning. Eric, why don't you tell us a little about who you are, where you're from?
Yeah. My name is Eric Bright. I'm a math teacher by day. I teach currently at Athens Academy in Athens, Georgia. We moved down to Georgia a few years ago. And I moonlight as a solo RPG designer, mainly in the Ironsworn design space. So I've got a lot of stuff up on Drive-Thru that you could check out if you want to take a look at those things. Yeah. And I've enjoyed the design process almost as much as the gaming process. So. But to clear things up and get a little bit into my backstory, I started role-playing games with WoW, with Warriors of Virtue, the game that you started off playing. And it was actually created by two brothers and then our good friend Danny Brown, who was running the game for us when we all got together. And when they created it, it was because they couldn't play D&D. It was, considered, it was a satanic panic and all that stuff.
We just had Monsters and Mazes with Tom Hanks, right?
Exactly. In fact, we even watched that at Danny's house one night when we were in high school. We're like, this is why we can't do it. Curse that Tom Hanks. And the two brothers had mainly made this, and Danny had made it, but it was the older brother who started putting in, unbeknownst to the rest of us, he started putting in actual D&D items in there that even had like bonuses at the way that the second edition worked, but the rest of us didn't know. And so when I started designing for WoW and I came in and we started selling it commercially a little bit, and I even got it copyrighted in the Library of Congress. Like we went official, baby.
It's official.
Yeah. I bought out the older brother and said for $10, and I said, your part's done. I'm designing it. And so actually we took more inspiration from Final Fantasy than we did D&D when we designed it. We had, the black and the white and the red magic, as we were kind of talking about before we went live. We tried to take even some spells that were in Final Fantasy and how would you do that in this role-playing game? Like we had weakness and things like that. And the Dragoon idea was, it was different than Final Fantasy, but that was our inspiration for it. And so, yeah, that was kind of where I started not only playing, but also designing, because I wasn't allowed to play. I begged for 4 years to play with Nathan and Danny, and they're like, no, we've got our own game. And, it's just continuing to go and you can't come in. And so I just had to design for the game instead of actually play outside of the Wabathons. But we can.
This is probably where you started your single gamer playing
yes
career.
I even bought so the blue bucket that's back up there, that's the bucket of men you guys referenced from the original WoW game. Nice. That is the bucket. And the I've got the chessboard over here too that you were talking about. It's down there, the original one. So I even bought, my own bucket of men to compete with theirs. I was the first one with the metal minis, and I'm like, look guys, I'm hardcore. And they're like, nah, we still got our game. There were like 5 of us who were asking to play, and they would never let us, And so I had to start designing, and that was finally the way I got in. I'm like, okay, look, I'll make new classes for you. And I also did a little bit of programming. We made it the first that I know of, character generator, where I don't remember if you remember that, but we programmed it in C++.
I had that on my computer.
In Delphi, yeah. And so I started doing some of that stuff and moving stuff over that way, and that's what finally let me in the door. And I said,
you have proved yourself worthy, young Eric.
Yes. And I think it helped when I said I think I can make you money because we can sell this thing. And we made enough money that I think each of us was able to purchase an Xbox. Over 2 years, we made enough money.
There you go.
Yeah.
Profits worth having.
It was
and
fun.
So you did change those things that was it Jake that was putting in the the D&D stuff. So he did change it. So when I said earlier in a podcast, I said, "Oh, this was basically just straight D&D under a different name." That's a lie. That's a lie. That was hyperbole in its greatest form, because in actuality, it is completely its own thing with the Library of Congress copyright.
Yes.
And sold.
Yeah, different. It was a 2d6 system rather than a d20. Yeah. The bonuses meant something different than they did in the D&D. So yeah, it was just it was our own heartbreaker. Is all it was.
And the nice thing was, it fired this guy's imagination for what role-playing games could be. And now look at us here, however many years later this is. What is this? 20 years later almost? It'll be 20 years in 2004 here when we rolled into the new year. Yeah, so that's when I came, was in 2004. So all these years later, now look at us right here. So, well, we're glad to have you on, to Eric, and we're going to go through our podcast the way we normally do. We usually hit an encounter. We usually talk about our main topic, which you're going to be a big part of today, or the big part of, and then we'll have an NPC at the end. So, Adam, why don't we go ahead and start in with our encounter? We're going to let Adam read the encounter, and then we're going to kind of react and talk about how we might drop it into a campaign or use it in a campaign.
For sure. This is Flame of Passion from the Eureka book here. A supernatural glacier that advances several feet a day has appeared in a nearby land. Shrouded in mist, it's known as the Icy Death, and it's approaching the kingdom's capital city, crushing every field, forest, town, and living thing in its path. The king has put out his top sages to work consulting ancient texts in order to find a way to halt its progress. The sages have found a text that describes how sacrificing, quote, the flame of passion will dispel the icy death, and they've determined that this is a reference to the queen, who is the flame that ignites the king's passion. Without hesitation, she offers herself up as a willing sacrifice in order to protect her kingdom and its people. Leaving the city with her retinue of knights, she heads for the glacier. Shortly after the queen departs, the PCs arrive in the capital. They've heard news of the Icy Death's return, and they consult with the king to see if they can help. Hearing the tale of the sages and the queen, the PCs with a background in history are concerned with the sages' interpretation. After reviewing the text in question, they reach another conclusion. The flame of passion is an alchemical formula, and they can create it with the proper ingredients. In a panic, the king asks them to create the flame, rescue the queen, and destroy the Icy Death. En route to the Great Glacier, the PCs must fight their way through a flood of refugees who are fleeing its approach. They'll have an encounter in which they rescue people from peril. Mounting the glacier itself, they'll face ice creatures tasked with preventing anyone from escaping across its surface. And when they find the queen, her knights are locked in a mortal combat with more ice creatures, and the PCs can turn the tide and rescue the queen. Once they convince her of the sage's error and of their plan to destroy the glacier, the queen and her knights will begin heading back towards the capital. In order to use the flame of passion to dispel the icy death, the PCs must fight their way across a vast swath of glacier, eventually reaching the ice demon at its heart. The flame of passion.
I like this one. I like this one because, like, right away, when I think about a glacier that's moving like, not like inch at a time over thousands of years, but like moving feet at a time and actually like crushing things, that fires my imagination. And then this whole idea that they come in and they find out about this messed up prophecy, and as they're going to do whatever, there's all these things like fleeing that oncoming doom. And so not only like people from towns that they might have to rescue who are in peril or whatever, but also like every monster that lives in every cave and woods and stuff. It's like, you know, when the forest fire comes and everything's running out together, but at the same time, if you're running in and they're all coming at you, you got to be careful. Right. And all the way up to like fighting the ice demon at the end, and you know what that means. Plus you've got this queen who's obviously loves her people enough to give up her own life. And so that can be a character hook in there. I just like all the different parts of this encounter. And I could see how this could drop into a campaign pretty easily and provide not just like one night of gaming, but like a few nights where you've got the, you know, finding out, solving the riddle, and then heading toward going through all the stuff coming at you. Then you've got to scale this thing that's more than just like, it's not just like as high as your living room ceiling. This is a glacier. This is huge. And so you got to get on this thing and then fight your way across. And then the fight with the people in the middle. And then my favorite, well, not my favorite, but a cool part would be like once you figure out how to do this flame, what happens to the glacier? Yeah, it just doesn't just disappear like that. So does it start melting in the middle, and then you have to figure out what am I doing in this huge soup of water as it's beginning to like make its way out, or what's that look like? So pretty cool.
And how does it affect the ecology afterwards? Because like you said, it was pushing these people forward, and even the monsters and everything else. And that's one of the things I like about it, is that it's good to lead into other things, but it also shows that the world is alive and can continue moving. Yeah. Even if you go in a different direction, you're like, well, remember when that glacier came through last year? Well, that meant that the fire dragon moved out because he didn't want to be in there when the glacier was coming down. So now he's taking up residence down there and has expanded his territory down south. So it has repercussions that go beyond this if you want it to.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. And it can even be like one of those things that if you are like using something to kick off a campaign and you're trying to figure out like, okay, what's thrown the world into such disarray? This could be it.
Yeah. I will say too, a couple things that I noticed about it. One is like you said, the queen. I really think that character, I'm imagining, what is it? Calanthe from the Witcher series, where it's this just noble warrior queen who's like, I don't even care. Let's go and kill me if this is going to be it. And just this, fighting her way out there or whatever, to make this happen. But the thing that I'm not a big fan of in this encounter, but this will tie into our main topic as well, is that there's a little bit of player agency that I think is lost here, because it says, the PC does this and figures this out, and I think we're usually better off just kind of leaving that up to see what the players actually do, and whether or not that's true. So Mike Shea has talked about Sly Flourish is what he goes by, secrets and clues in a campaign or a hook like this. And so it might be that one secret that could be discovered is that the flame of passion is actually this, this concoction that they have to make. But if they never discover that secret, then something else might turn out to be the answer. Right. And one of the things that I like as we get into the dice directed play and GMless play is the game unfolds and you figure out what happens as it unfolds. And so I think this is a really cool prompt to let it really unfold, because what if, you get there with the strong character of the queen and you thought it was this concoction, but it's really not. And she's like, forget it. And she, grabs the concoction and downs it herself and says, we're going to do both. I just drank this and now you're going to, take me out. Like there's lots of directions that you could take it and jump, jumping off points that gives the characters, the players, some agency in the play that will also then have those repercussions that we talked about earlier, so that they get kind of a say in the world building aspect of the game as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And, this is where you can exercise your kind of improvisational skills as a GM. If she takes this and drinks it, she's this beloved character. Probably your characters are going to admire her as much as the people in her kingdom. And so then what becomes of her? Does she die just completely? Does she, and then that causes something? Does she become like metamorphosed into like some goddess of some sort? Yeah, fire beast. Right. Who knows? And then, going back to the king, I couldn't help but like think of him and think, okay, who is this like coward? He's staying home while she goes and does this. Even if he really loved her, like, wouldn't he like? I don't know. It just seems like,
so now you got a revolution to deal with in future games.
Right. It's like you
got so much you can do with this. This is a whole
the Psalms when David's there. It really it's like when the kings normally go off to war, David was back on the,
right.
Hey, where are you at, buddy? Why are you still here?
Yeah.
This is one of those where I like what you're saying about agency. I've actually struggled with that some with these encounters. And I think it's just part of the way they're written, but also we want to let people make choices, and they're always going to make the choice that's not laid out there, and expecting that. But I like, the complexities of like what you were saying, Matthew, being able to work within the motivations of these people. And that's going to help with that improvisation that happens. So knowing that the queen is the kind of person that's going to sacrifice herself for this is going to cause something to look different if the players go a different direction. Even like, I think about those knights, and it's like,
Yeah.
their loyalty is to the queen. So when this group of people come up and they're like, no, 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 like they're trying to dissuade her or even stop
Yep.
her by force because she's not listening, like that's going to be a problem. And then you're having people who are both trying to work towards the same end at odds. There's going to be motivations driving there, or even you guys already mentioned the things fleeing, like their motivation is I'm getting away from this thing and it doesn't matter who's in my way. So you have all this like complications that are building there too. So I like that idea, and just like digging into that motivations, like trying to understand all these people and like work with that. So yeah, it's a good one.
And I like what you said there about the knights that that go with her. I love the idea of them, you know, you painting the picture of like, you know, the purple trim on the silver, and they're this special fighting unit, and you go in thinking, oh, we're going to save the day. And then like them, like this scene where they just like, so efficiently dispatch like the craziest onslaught of something while you're watching, and you're like, oh my goodness, they might be tougher than us.
Yeah.
But we know something that's going to like change the outcome. But that doesn't mean that like we're the muscle coming in when you see these guys, and that could be a recurring thing that this group, you know, let's say the queen doesn't die, this group and her might be recurring throughout this campaign. Maybe it's something you even like try to become at some point, or aspire to. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Question I have. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I think there's also some opportunities for the entertainer here. Like you just said, painting a picture. And I was thinking about that too with the landscapes, you know, whether you're up on top of the glacier, or to me, I was thinking of this icy maze that you're going through all these tunnels of ice. And so you're seeing the shadows through like this, you know, this bluish haze light and stuff. And so believe it or not, I've had, you guys know that I've had back issues, you know, over the years. And one of the things that they suggested for me to do was sit in green LED light. So
Really?
Yeah, I have no idea why, and I don't think it actually works. But you know, whatever. There was a study that said it worked a little bit, but I still have a green LED light sitting over there, and it was like $1 or $2. So you could go out and get, you know, a blue LED light and just change your lamp bulbs to blue that night, and then you start talking about, okay, we're in this cave, and you're seeing these shadows going over and all that stuff. I think you get a really cool ambiance here if you can pull it off, I think.
Yeah.
I have these like little square, well, I'd bring it in the camera here. These little lights that I got during pandemic when we were all doing Zoom. That's kind of where this like whole look came from. I was in pandemic. I'm like, okay, I don't want to be just sitting in like a white wall behind me. So I kind of set my office up here and got lights around. But those lights, you can go through the whole color spectrum. And that is a really good idea for like lots of different settings, not just this ice setting. But like if you have a couple of those, I've got one set up shining on the wall there and one set up back there shining. You can't really tell till I turn them off, but I can change the colors. And when I do, it really changes the look of this. But you put those in your game room, shine them up at a couple corners and turn them green or red one night, you know, when you're in like the fire, turn them blue when you're in the ice. It really does change the feel. You're right. Yeah. That's a good idea.
Imagine, you know, black light game when you're going to the abyss.
Like,
and then you go, then you say no electronic character sheets. You have to use just a white sheet of paper so it shines in the
And then what you don't tell them is that you've invisibly painted this black light stuff all over your face, and when you first turn them on, you look like a demon.
That's right. Lemon juice. You're like, oh, it's in my eye. Yeah.
Medic, I need healing.
Question that I have coming out of this is it's more mechanical here, but creating urgency in these kind of things, I feel like I struggle in that, and I don't know if you guys have thoughts about like how that's worked well, or things that you've seen, particularly like, okay, the ice, the glacier is coming, it's coming, you know, and like what's the urgency other than this thing's coming towards us, going to wreck it? Is there something that we can do more like to create urgency within the players? But also you two both mentioned like this thing's like collapsing after you use the fire of passion, you know, or the fire that ignites passion to like destroy this glacier, start to take it down. What's the urgency there? So have either of you like seen things that work well with that, or have thoughts in your mind with that?
I would, I mean, personally, I would have some court, mathematician sitting there with his glasses and his robes, and he's like, if this thing comes by this time, the kingdom will be destroyed and the queen's sacrifice will be for nothing. And you set that in turns. So it's like, okay, you've got, 48 turns, and this is going to be at the castle gates, crushing the castle gates, and maybe the king, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe 48's too few. I'd have to think about that for a moment, but you could do it in terms of turns.
Right.
But there might be other ways too.
Yeah, you use your dice mechanic that you talked about in one of the previous podcasts, where you just set the dice out. You got a D10, and every once in a while, maybe every 15 minutes of real game, or real time while you're playing the game, you just click it over, and and people know something is going to happen. So part of that is raising the stakes. Knowing what is at stake and having the characters have a stake in that. Right. So if maybe there's a village that's in the way. Maybe there's a friend who was studying the glacier for something else, and they're also in trouble. Maybe they know somebody who's nearby, or it could be just as simple as more monsters have been displaced, and now there's more fights. The longer you take to deal with this, the tougher the fights are going to get as you get there. So you're really going to have to decide on a course of action and get to it. I can also give you something that doesn't work. So when I was here. We first moved here, I did find a gaming group that I was kind of hooked up with that fell apart during the pandemic and never got back together. But the guy who's leading it moved in down the street, so it may happen yet again. But I tried to do a game of Sentinels with them, but it was a homebrew of Sentinels. But we were the Sentinels in the multiverse. I mean, they were Wraith, they were Legacy, and Omnitron had attacked, and they were at Freedom Tower. And I said, missiles are coming. The tower is falling. Amelia Twain has just fallen out the window, and you got to save her, or else she's going to become misinformation and all that stuff. And so I threw up this Jeopardy theme in the background that was like, a 2 minute. It wasn't actually the Jeopardy. I think it was Mission Impossible, but it basically felt like the Jeopardy theme. And I'm like, 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it was, and then everything's down. So what are you guys doing? And it took. The timer had completely counted down before they had figured out what they wanted to do on their character sheets. They were still like, "Oh wow, what does this action do? What is?" I'm like, "Okay, so that there was no urgency there. I'm sorry, I guess." And maybe that would work for some people, but it did not work because it was a brand new system. So, tip for all of our ascending GMs out there: don't try a new GM tactic necessarily when you're doing a brand new system, because people will be learning that system in the first place. So, other thoughts on urgency?
I hadn't thought about urgency in that yet in other ways, but I did think about when that starts to go away, what's that going to look like? Yeah. You were talking about that too, when this flame thing happens, whatever it is. And you've got like suddenly water everywhere. And what does that do? Of course, I thought of Josh pulling out his dust of dryness and sucking it all up. And having this amazing hey, I just realized we have the wrong background on our boom. Let's get that Rise of the GM up there. All of you who are just listening to the podcast, you're like, what in the world just happened? You'll have to go watch it on YouTube to find out. I think there's probably other ways to bring urgency in. I don't know, Adam, if you thought of anything else. I think those are some good ideas, though.
Yeah, I think it's good. I really do like there are horrible things that are going to happen if we don't deal with this. So let's not go shop for cure potions for the next 2 hours, kind of thing. And because that can happen. But I am really into the like post. Okay, this is all over with. This thing has like melted or whatever, fallen apart. I mean, there is wreckage behind this thing, and yes. the big thing is like you said, like the world is living. We've talked about like the world continues to move on regardless of whether you are over here or over there. Things are happening. Choices matter, and like I do like that just for like the world building, but also it does open up so many things. It's like, okay, all of this land is now gone. Like basically, if there was a village there, it's destroyed. If there was a cave there full of kobolds, they need to go somewhere else. And so that's all a thing. And farmland is ruined. So now there's a problem here. All these monsters are moving. I think that is a really cool thing to just, I think a lot about like post post end game stuff in like the MCU, they're dealing with some like political things, but it's like, all right, all these people disappeared, we moved on with life, and now they're all back. How do we deal with that? And I think about that in terms of now, okay, creatures, villagers, kingdom people, what are they doing now? And that's a pretty cool way to just like, I mean, that's session after session after session could be wrapped up in just what happened after. So this is a great one.
And I think a cool thing for all you GMs out there, a really cool thing is you do like your game, you have this encounter, you go and you do whatever you're doing in this world. And then at some point your campaign ends. And then you do whatever, and then a little bit later you start another campaign. This can be one of those really cool things that's like history of the world, you know? So like I was thinking of Red Markets where they have, you know, the loss at the Mississippi River. Is that where it's at?
Yep.
The everything to the west is considered lost, you know, lost to the zombies, and they've built a fortified wall and civilizations on the other side. Well, that's the kind of thing I think here. You go into a new campaign, and in this campaign, it's years later, and now up there is like the desolation, and there's this strong line where the desolation stops, but because of that there's more monsters down here, but there's like a lot of archaeological finds and stuff, that everything that was smashed and plowed under, up above, people are like doing all this, and you're like, you can really think, okay, so this might have been just an encounter I did, but because of the enormity of it, this can also be like history and world building.
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking of Red Markets too, of that, the game that we were trying to find stuff in there was that flooded building that we had to figure a way out into, because there's goods that are available. So this glacier's gone through, and like you said, everything's there. You're going to have so much banditry after that, right? People are going to be going into there trying to find the good stuff and get it out before anybody else does. So there's going to be this mini gold rush of villains
that's true.
into these flooded lands. You know, and maybe a lot of them don't make it out. Maybe the ice demon's influence is still there. And so now you've got either all these undead popping up or ghosts, or the ice demon is still around and able to influence the people, if not the land. Right. So, this is a good hook. And I think hopefully this podcast as a whole for people who are listening is an exercise in how you can be creative almost with any situation. Cause I think a lot of the encounters you guys have highlighted have this potential to go as far as the players and the GM want to take it. And don't be afraid to try it. You know, if it dies, if you know, you're like, I'm going to turn this into a campaign. Oh, it's 3 sessions. Well, that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. You can bring it back later, like the history, like you said. But you gave it a go. And the more you flex those creative muscles, the better you're going to be at it. And that's also going to tie into our diceless stuff too. That, you know, practice doesn't make perfect, but it helps improve.
And before we move on from this, you said something there. It's like maybe the ice demon's influence still resides. I just had this picture of Game of Thrones, like the White Walker who was like raising up all the people who had just died in that one battle, and they all just rise up, and like in your heart, you're like, oh my goodness, have something like that up there. You know, it's like you fought, you got rid of the glacier, but this guy's still there, and now he's raising all these things that died, and now you've got this kind of zombie monster, like. Yeah, there's a lot of fun.
Now in my final form.
Right. Right. Hey, we do want to go ahead and go into kind of the main topic and the main meat of this session, and that is this idea of single player or role facilitated gaming. And we brought Eric on because Eric has, like he has said, he has done this and it, you know, had it for sale on Drive Through RPG, right?
Yep.
And I'll always remember Eric from the time I met Eric. He's always been about the dice and what the dice do. He used to be the worst roller I ever met. I don't know if that's still the case. But
I checked my dice for 2 years, and I was like 3 points below average. Like that doesn't happen.
This is what I was getting ready to say. He like tracked every die roll of the D20 for years.
Yes.
And like, you know, he said he's a math teacher by day. That didn't stop in our gaming time. He would still be doing that math stuff. I would just sit and say, oh, I have horrible luck. He'd say, well, actually, here's the statistics. Let all the rolls. So, Eric, we do want to go in and let you kind of lead off with what is this idea about single player and role facilitated? Because I know so many of us would be thinking, okay, I find some people to game with, and it took me a long time. I finally found some people, and now I'm trying to figure out how to do this. But there's another alternative. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so there are really kind of 3 modes of gaming. You know, there's your traditional model where it's GM led, and I think at this point we're starting to call it guided play, right? That
Mhm.
there's somebody who's guiding it, and I think that communicates more that we're all in this together. We've got agency, and we can world build together. So, and that's usually what we think of when we're thinking of playing a role playing game, is that guided experience through the GM.
Right.
The second one is cooperative play, where everyone is a player together, and you have a set of rules that you are following, but you discover it together and make
Mm.
meaning together as you go. And a lot of that is directed by dice rolls, usually on tables and things like that, to give you kind of imagination starters. So you've got guided, you've got cooperative, and then the third one is truly solo play, where again you have a framework, a set of rules that you're playing by, but you are exploring the game for yourself. And that can take place in many forms. It can be just a straight up D&D game. In fact, one of the first solo games I played was in conjunction with our campaign. It was when I was Golderon, I think it was his name. The guy with the owl. He had the antlers that captured the owl, and then he shrunk himself down to fairy size so that he had an AC of 40. Yeah, that was. But I took him on solo adventures, and to me, those solo adventures actually made our gaming time when we all got together more rich, because even though it didn't necessarily change what we were doing at the table, it added, in my mind, impetus to the story and urgency a little bit in some cases, but also just kind of these side ideas of why this world was important. But it ranges from a D&D style game solo to all the way to journaling games, where literally there is a solo game that is you write letters back and forth.
Oh,
you
really?
take the role of like a noble or something, and so you write a letter, and that's all you're doing is just writing the letter. And then I think you roll some dice to see kind of the general response to your letter, and then you write the next letter, right? So it doesn't all have to be just battle mats and click clack of the dice. That when you go solo, you kind of have to make some choices as far as how you want that to play out and what you want that to look like. So
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I know that a big part for me of making a game like more exciting than just the game night is the times where I sit and write backstory, and I craft these backstories and I post them. We would post them to a thing we used to call the Conflux, and then turned into various other things. But I'd go on there and I'd read those, and I'd be so proud of my character. I'd be so excited about what was going to happen. And it was all more of that kind of writing, journaling background. But then you started doing this thing where you would go on quests. You would you would write up these things, and I'd be reading them. I'm like, what is he talking about? Oh, wait. He played like a session with him, and I feel like there was a girl in there.
There was a dwarf and a girl that were basically my companions. And they had befriended one of the silver dragons that was in the world. And so I was doing a side quest where I was trying to save these dragon eggs that didn't have anything to do necessarily with our quest, but it was this one silver dragon who was just a mom bereaved of not having her children, and so I was going out and trying to help when I could. And it was almost like Adam's character situation where I bamfed in and bamfed out because they could teleport me in or whatever it was. But so to jump off one thing you said, Matthew, that you liked writing those things down and getting ready. One of the things that the Ironsworn creator, Sean Tompkin, has really said, and is all over the Ironsworn Discord, and I agree with, is that prep is play. When you finally realize that preparing, that is you playing the game. It's just you playing the game on your own. Boy, you can start to really enjoy that.
I love that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely. That is so great for you to say, and for the people who are hearing this in all of the various forms, whether you're a GM or a player, to hear that prep is a good part of the fun. It's kind of like they talk about dopamine is about anticipation. Dopamine happens when you are anticipating getting something, or anticipating winning, or anticipating even more than when you actually get it. That kind of thing happens in gaming too. It's that prep, that anticipation of what it's going to be like when everybody, comes together, and this, all this stuff that you've prepared happens. That's huge.
And even if it doesn't happen the way that you thought it would, you still enjoyed it in that moment, right? It was still worthwhile because it was playing the game in and of itself. And hopefully, even if it didn't go the way you thought, you get to look at the game that did happen and say, this was also worthwhile. This was a cool,
Oh, yeah.
a cool way to make it happen as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think that's even more cool than I could have come up with, the way that unfolded between us all together.
Yeah, for sure. Eric, when you're looking at this, just like thinking more mechanics oriented, so if somebody's interested in looking into this, you talked about the middle one where it's like everybody kind of discovering it together. What was the name of that again?
Cooperative play.
Cooperative.
Yep.
Which we have done.
Yes.
That was something like me, you, and Evan did recently. And then the solo play, mechanically, like, can you kind of walk through like what that looks like versus our typical kind of traditional play?
Yeah. So in either style, cooperative or solo play, you're really going to need what has traditionally been called a GM emulator, right? You're going to need something that's going to be kind of making decisions for you. And we've kind of boiled that down to the word oracle at this point. And so, what are the oracles that you're using? And those are really just random tables for the most part. And so it kind of started with, in fact, I've got some here to to show for everybody, but it started with the Mythic Game Master emulator. And it was just this, I mean, it's a thin book, right? I mean, this is skinny, and really out of the whole book, all you need are 2 pages. And so I literally just print these 2 pages off, and you got a page that has your percentiles. And the big thing that you're doing there is a yes, no question. And so if you think of improvisation with the, yes, and there's a yes, but, there's a no, and a no, but. And so you kind of have degrees of yes or no based on what you think the probability of something is. And so that's going to be your main driver, is kind of these yes, no type questions. When I go to the glacier, did I get there to the queen before she's dead? Sure, it's highly likely. So I roll on this table and I see, is it a yes or is it a no? Okay. And then that sets up the next scene, right? And then as you need more details than just a simple yes or no, that's when you go to these charts, which usually are kind of like a verb noun. I like the way that Ironsworn puts it, with an action and a theme is what they call it, action and theme. And you can just roll on those tables. They're usually a D100. That's a little bit small for me. I like to have a little bit more tables, but or a little bit thicker. And that really is all you need. It's just that kind of action theme, those tables, and you're good to go, because that can spark the imagination and take you someplace. So if I showed up and said, the queen, she's not been, whoa, just hit my microphone. She's not been killed yet. I talk with my hands, apparently. She's not been killed yet. What did happen? I would roll the dice, and maybe I got 43 for the action, which is imprison. And then I rolled again, and it says burden, imprison a burden. And so I would go, okay, what does that spark in me? Imprisoning a burden. You know what? She came here, actually, and this is here. See, we're doing it right here live. This is cool. Here. Okay. She actually didn't come here to be a sacrifice for her people. It really wasn't about sacrificing. It's because she has some burden. There was some great sin in her past that she is now trying to make up for. And she thinks that if she does this, that somehow it will make up for that thing. So what was that thing, right? Now we got to find out what that thing is. But more importantly, what did the characters find that lead to that? Yeah. Well, how would they figure that out? Well, they found a locket that has a picture in it that's not the king. It's somebody else, right? And so you kind of take the Occam's blade approach of, or Occam's razor, sorry, that whatever is the most obvious thing in the moment is probably the right choice to make. And so, then the story just unfolds from there. And so maybe this glacier thing is actually not an ice demon at all. Maybe it has to do with a curse that she put on the land accidentally. And see, now we're in a whole new direction. And we got a whole
And what I love about this, so I'm obviously I don't know if it's obvious, but I'm thinking of this in terms of like group. So this would be the facilitated gaming is what I'm thinking of, where everybody, you don't have somebody who feels qualified to GM, but you have these tables, but everybody feels pretty creative, and they feel free to like be creative together. Such an amazing story can come from that. And people, you get a little bit away from the guys who just want to roll and see if they roll high and hit. Do I hit? When's the next battle? And it turns into more like, how do we build story, which I love that. And so and obviously with the single player, this could also work in that you're doing all of that yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the solo mode, yeah, I guess let me back up to the cooperative just for a second. When Adam and I and Evan did it, we started off more traditional where I was just the GM, and then we transitioned into cooperative because we lost a person. And so I still had more in mind than I thought, and so I still kind of ended up taking the lead a little bit, but we really were able to create something. So for all of you GMs out there, if you start GMing a game and you feel like this is just overwhelming, don't be afraid to try and change to this cooperative method, because you could start to build that together, and that may take some of the pressure off of you for a while, and you may find out, wow, we like this way, or somebody else might say, oh, I've got an idea, you know what, I could lead it from here, or kind of lead the next one. So that more story building is a way for you to kind of build some GMing chops there. And I think our story, Adam, went in directions I had no idea that was going to go, and things didn't happen. You became the wolf clan chief of, I think, 2 wolf clans or 3, because every time we went to a village of wolf people, you challenged the leader immediately for leadership. And so I think by the end, we probably could have taken our tribes of wolves and taken the dragon out. But
Adam was always about those cohorts of followers.
Yeah, I love people.
Yeah, he's just ranging. But the solo play works the same way, except you're deciding how mechanically. So how does it work? And that is a choice that you're going to have to make if you want to do this on your own. There are a lot of people who do just bullet point journaling. That this is kind of what happened. In fact, I think there's even a special name for the type of bullet point journaling that a lot of people use. Some people will write it out as a full narration, and that's what I tend to do. I write it out as if it's a story. If I were going to read it, and in fact, I still go back now and read my previous games. And like, I love it. And so I do that. And other people will do like we're doing now and do a video podcast. So if you haven't seen Me, Myself, and Die on YouTube here, you can check it out. He had 3 seasons of solo play. Right now he's doing a season of traditional gameplay. But that would be something for GMs wanting to check it out or wanting to try it on your own. You could see what he did. Now this is high production from a voice actor who works with Matt Mercer and all those people. Nice. So he's in the gaming sphere. So don't hold yourself up to that standard, because he spends 10 or 20 hours a week, putting out one video of an hour. But you can choose different mediums through which you could do this. Just record it on an audio. I made an audio track and put in a few sound effects when I was fighting and stuff. And again, Prep is Play, I had fun digging out those sound effects to go, okay, what is this, putting the arrow in and the swords. So there are lots of mechanical bits as far as how do you record that this session happened? Because I think if you do it just solely in your mind, I mean, really, you're just, you're just sitting in a chair.
Somebody walks in. What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm playing a game. I think you need some sort of historical record that shows that that you played, and it is that exercise in creativity, because otherwise while you are being creative kind of in your head, there's no necessarily product to show, and there's not a product to show when we get together and game, but there is in that we gamed, we were there,
and
so I think you want that same feeling.
You said preparing is play.
Yeah.
Prep is play. I would even say that part of the whole idea of any of these role-playing games is the community remember. I don't know how many times we have gotten together and we just sit and we talk about scenes or game things that happen, and we sit there and enjoy it, and we do that for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And that is as much the fun of role playing as the moment that you're actually role playing. It's going back in these kind of these tall tales that sprout from that, and this shared remembrance. I know that's part of playing too, I would think, and I'd never thought about it like that before. But like just where you say prep is play, I think the post is play too, whatever you would call that.
Yeah, you still enjoy it afterwards. I mean, there's a reason that it's the cliche that we all share our role-playing stories that nobody else gets because they weren't there.
Yeah.
It's because they made such an impact on us, right? It's because it was so special to us and it was part of it. We are still getting enjoyment from that game even afterwards.
Yeah, that's true.
One of my favorite solo games that I did was more of a journaling one. where your character is actually an item. And so I was a magic shield. Okay. The game is called Artifact. If you want to look it up, it's on itch. It's a great game. And so I was a shield, and my first owner was like this owner that I fell in love with. She was this warrior, princess type thing. And she had
Was she seductive?
She probably was. Yes, she definitely. I mean, she's going to be one of our NPCs. It's coming up. Yeah. But she definitely was. Fiery red hair. And she had this, thin sword that she would fight with. And I was like a buckler on her left arm. And I just reveled in these battles that we would have. Right. And the way the story unfolds, the way the game unfolds, is you get new owners and they don't always treat you the best. And sometimes you get lost to time. And by the end of this, I had been taken by an evil cult. I was, used against my will to do these evil things. The magic sucked out of me, and I was broken. I had been snapped in half, and I was sitting in this museum of this bean counter, who was telling the story to people who were, coming around the museum. He was like the museum guide and telling the story of this shield, and they had found the gem that was in her sword, or of my first owner's sword. And they had put the two halves of my shield around her gem. And he's going through and telling this story that is completely bogus. It was not even what actually happened. It's like, through the eyes of history, everything's been lost. But at the very end, the lights shut out and the two halves of my shield came together and like hugged that gem. And I finally felt like I was home and died.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I cried. I'm sitting here by myself, writing the story myself, and I'm in tears. It was wonderful. It was one of the most magical experiences I've ever had in solo gaming. And I was a freaking shield.
Yep.
That's what's awesome about that is that gives you this whole different perspective when you get an intelligent item.
Yeah.
In a game, to think like the times you said I was, taken by this cult and I was used against my will. You think now differently about like what happens when an intelligent item like resists what you're doing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so some people actually use the Artifact game to develop their intelligent items in D&D.
Awesome.
Oh, that's cool. That's
That
really
is
cool.
awesome.
Yeah. Because the game has lots of different types of items that you can be, and then you go through and roll and see what happens next. And
tell me once again the name of that.
Artifact.
Artifact.
Yeah, I can't remember if it's Artifact or the Artifact, but it's on itch. So
I'm gonna link these things too as in our socials for sure, so we can check that. There's something about that creative process. Like I've definitely, like when we've played games, like our traditional games to like completion, I always have this like, there's a heart thing for me where I'm like, there's kind of the like, oh, this is awesome, and a letdown, and man, that was a beautiful story. And there have been moments like the one you two guys played in, the one with the dragons that you were referencing earlier, Eric. Like that one, like was really the first time I had run a campaign where I was like, I'm like having an emotional reaction right now as we're like finishing this. And I don't know if you guys like that was a me thing, as like crafting that, but I was really surprised. You're talking about the Ironsworn game that we, you semi GM'd and semi it was collaborative. One, how much we did in that, like I don't know how many sessions we played, maybe 10.
Yeah.
Was it even that? Like somewhere in that?
Yeah, it was close. It was probably 10 or somewhere
maybe
between
12.
8 and 12. Yeah.
Yeah. There not a lot of sessions. I mean, that's like our typical Thursday night. That's 3 to 4 months, worth of playing. And we had done that. And one, just like the way that we were able to get together, we're asking those questions like, okay, you've come across something in this ilk, like what is it? And we talk about that. And I think it's this, and or these are the people. Do we like that? Like, is that, having those discussions and building that together. But man, like we got to the end of that and I was like wrecked. And I had to like think for like several weeks, that game, the way that game ended, because it was a fail. We failed.
We failed. Yes, we failed.
We failed died. In our, we had made these like, I am making this oath that I will deal with this dragon. And I had like my character had taken this girl like under, like kind of as like a foster
Yeah.
daughter in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you
because
became
her-
the father figure.
you know, and I'm like, you know, and part of it was kind of a weird thing, but like trying to like, I will help you with your mission once this mission is over. And she like died in the end of that. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
I have to think about my life right now about like
Yeah.
this stuff, because it was really interesting to me just to like process even, okay. And I think it was rooted in that game's amazing. This is Ironsworn, you know, we're talking about. I think it's an awesome system, but I think it was rooted in that collaboration also
Yes.
of like, we built this thing together and it moved so far, like so much happened in the short amount of time. And I'm like invested, you know, and I think that there is
Exactly.
something
Yes.
about that of even talking about like, if you're running a traditional game, you know, you're listening to this and you're like, I'm running more like I'm running this, facilitating it as a GM. I think there is some beauty in bringing that, even if you're not doing the role facilitated stuff. Right. Of like, what does it look like to walk in and be like, hey, this is kind of the situation, but what do you all see in this, and have like your players bring in their insights also. I liked what you said about even like releasing some of the pressure by having people put detail into it. But I think that ownership is like so important. And it was just a really cool experience for me to get to the end of that. I'm like, we've played like, you know, 8 to 12 times, 2 hours each time. And I'm like at the same place I was after this like year and a half to level 15 game, like emotionally invested, you know, so that was really cool.
And we never leveled up.
Right. Yeah.
we never gained any abilities. We never like, we were still level 1.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know, if levels existed in Ironsworn, and I think that collaborative is the big piece of that. So there, again, another cliche in role-playing games is the GM versus the players. And we know that that's not the case,
right?
But it can feel that way at times to players. And the GM can sometimes feel, well, if they're not, you know, dying, I'm not really doing my job, you know, every once in a while. And that collaboration kind of takes that pressure off, and to go, no, this really is together. And that's why I like the verbiage that, again, Ironsworn came up with this. Instead of saying it's a, you know, traditional or GM game, that it's a guided game. And when we get to that idea that, we're guiding, but this is all together, then I think you get that investment much more quicker because the players jump in. So even with our encounter earlier, you know, starting with the glacier, if I were going to use that in a kind of in any fashion, the guided fashion or the collaborative fashion or the solo fashion, I would start with, there's a glacier that's destroying stuff and it's coming. The king has this prophecy that they think the flame of passion, and the queen's going to go sacrifice herself. The end. Like that would be my whole prompt.
Right.
And then we would go from there and see what actually happens. And actually, I think we did another guided session where I had guided with Upwind. The one where we had that foppish prince, remember, who, you know, he acted like he was all goof, but he was really the thing. And then there was the underwater battle with the dragons and stuff. That all came from, so another resource for GMs who want to do this. Since the pandemic, people have jumped on the solo RPG bandwagon like never before. Like when I was solo GMing, I didn't even know other people did it. I thought I was by myself. Like,
wow.
And so, but since the pandemic, lots of people have been out there. So there are even decks of cards that just have an encounter that fits on a poker card, and you can just draw a poker card. And that's what we did when we played Upwind. We drew a poker card. I said, I have no idea what we're playing tonight. Here it is. And then we went from there.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you know, again, for our ascending GMs out there are resources available for you to just kind of dip your toe in and see how you feel about it.
For sure.
I want to jump back to something Adam said. Just again, this show, we have so many thoughts in the moment, but we're trying to help GMs like make good games with your groups. And Adam was talking about, like, at the end of the 3 months of this, he was just wrecked and he had to think about his life because of this girl dying. I do think that a lot of people, they'll think, okay, I want to run a game. They'll kind of run a game, and then when it's done, it's like people are like, okay, that's over, and they jump to the next game. There is a time to allow people to write epilogue. And I think that thinking that goes beyond, and then them getting to kind of write after the story was over, here's well, in the game I did, Dormant, was it Dormant Mind? No, Oracle of Order. Eric's character ended up roommating.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. Yeah.
with Rolla, with a character that I first of all didn't even plan to be in the game. He just kind of occurred and then kept coming back and then became a more important part. And in the epilogue, Eric's character, who was the character in that game? You were the
Veskich Titchery. Vess, the dragon.
Vess. I could never say the whole name, but Vess ended up being a roommate with this character and wrote like this epilogue. But those sorts of things where you allow the character in the player's mind to go on and have life and to kind of work through. And like Adam said, you take time to think after the game is over, man, how did that impact me? Because I think that's an important part of GMing also. And so when you finish a game, don't just be too quick to say, okay, never shall we return to that again. Let's move on, but allow that space.
And I think one thing that we used to do too is when a campaign was over, we'd take the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks and play Sentinels, we'd play poker, we'd play, and we'd switch it around. And one of the things that I've heard and I think is true is that some of the best role playing comes from a group of friends who get together who also like to game, So in other words, we've got those relationships, and the RPG is not the main thing, although it is the main thing we do, but it's again, that collaborative nature of just us being human beings and relating to one another. So taking that time afterwards, just decompress, play a different game. And again, that can spark some new creativity and build, like you said earlier, some anticipation for those dopamines. We're like, you know what? I'm itching to roll some more dice. When are we going to do that? So take some time to absorb what you've done. It's good.
Mm-hmm. So in previous, and you started to talk about a little bit of this earlier, but in some of our previous episodes, we've talked about the different hats, like the different roles: entertainer, storyteller, facilitator. Like that's one we took, 4 episodes to talk through those. I think you mentioned the entertainer earlier. So questioning about how do you fit into that, but also I know you've listened to it, but the 8 types of fun that we've talked about, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about like what makes you tick in those things and like how that's played out in your RPG time too.
Yeah. Well, I think as far as my kind of GM hat, and I'm not I don't think I've ever been a traditional GM, where I, get the whole story. I just couldn't, I never could do that. And I never figured out why until I started doing this more directed stuff. I'm like, oh, this is me. And I think it's more because it's that storytelling aspect that I get to tell the cool story that, whenever I watch an episode of Star Trek and I'm like, Data would not do that. I get to, say that this is the way it's going to go. So I think the storyteller in me comes out, which is weird because it's in juxtaposition to my major type of fun, which is power game, kill everything. Like that's like I want, even in 5e, they've got that AC cap or whatever, like you can't get above 20. Screw that. I want an AC of 40 still. I don't ever want to be hit and I never want to miss. I want to kill people in one shot. So that is my type of fun. And so I think with the storytelling is the GM, and then go with the I don't even know where the power gamer fits in the type of fun, but I can do both when I do the solo thing. So in fact, when I was playing Ironsworn, it's played with 2 d8s as the challenge dice, and so you're rolling a d6 plus a bonus, and you're trying to get above both of the d10s, okay, to be a success. If you get above only one of the d10s, it's a partial success, and if you get get below both of them, it's not a success. And that's again a mechanic that you can use, degrees of success rather than just binary. And so when it was D10s, I'm like, this is too hard. I'm going to D8s. So like I'm rolling a D6, and they said every character, should basically have 1+3 stat, 2 +2s and 2 +1s. Like, forget that. I got a +4, 2 +3s, and 2 +2s, and I'm doing the D8s. And even then, I still died with my dice rolls. I had this whole thing planned out in my head. I'm like, this campaign is going to go forever. And in the 3rd episode, I died. And that was with all those changes I made power game. but as the storyteller part of me, I got to come back, and so then I became because that particular character was this old just became a grandpa, and he was going in to see his granddaughter who was just born. And when he went to see his granddaughter being born, the town was taken over by these monsters, and he was a Witcher type person, slaying monsters, but he was retired because he was old.
Okay.
And so the granddaughter escaped somehow. He found his daughter right before she was getting ready to die from the monster, but it was a choice between leave her for dead or go find his granddaughter. And so he nursed his daughter back to health, and then continued to try and find his granddaughter, died in the process. And so the next game I came back as the granddaughter, and I was playing, and she had discovered his sword and was then going to kind of take up the mantle. So, but again, that's that storyteller part of me coming out where I'm like, okay, this is going to continue somehow, and what's it going to look like? So I think that's where I fall. Do you have the 8 types of fun handy that you could read those again and remind me and our viewers and listeners of what those are?
While he's getting those, I just want to comment on the fact that I love that dichotomy you have of, I know that I kind of fall a little bit into the same category where as a player, I guess you would call it min-maxing. I really like my character to be like everything to work together to make this ideal sort of character.
Yep.
But then I also love that storytelling part where sometimes that character fails, but I still want to build them. And I think there is fun. I don't know if that's one of the 8 types of fun that would be considered in there, but I do love that building this, everything working together for this min-maxed character.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Did you find it?
So straight up pull off Gnome Stew here. Website. Everyone see that okay? If you're
here, we got to add it to the stage.
Listening, then you're not going to see
big.
anything. Just so you know, but we're going to talk about it.
Okay.
It'll look better.
Okay, so we got sensation. That's the dice and token stuff, right? Fantasy is like the. I can't read it. It's also small. Maybe add
I'll read
to
it for you. Fantasy. That's the fact this isn't our world, so you get to go and do things that you wouldn't normally do. Narrative is the storytelling aspect, how you experience stories. Challenge is that overcoming of obstacles. Fellowship, just that community, being social, friendship kind of thing, being able to talk and be together. Discovery is seeing what's kind of the next thing, experiencing the world, and just discovering things. Expression, story creation, and self-expression, bringing a bit of ourselves to the game table. And then the submission one is that is ritual. The ritual of the thing, and gathering together, saying this is a habit that we have, or like a rhythm of our week kind of thing. So that's those.
Well, I think if I had to go through those, definitely the fantasy, I like escapism. So while I've not been role play gaming as much as I would like, I have been playing a heck of a lot of Guild Wars 2. I crafted 6 legendary weapons in the last 3 months. Like, I'm on fire. but it's mainly because I just want to come and just be numb. And part of that is I'm trying to escape my back pain, and part of it is other frustrations that are coming out, and I just need something to veg. So the fantasy part is probably big for me, as well as the expression and narrative. I think those two kind of tie together.
Sure.
The one that has always been weird for me out of that list of 8, though, and I hope me saying this will help some other either players or GMs out there, is the fellowship aspect. And I've probably never told you guys this, but I struggled every week to come to our game sessions, just because I am not social by nature. I'm social and having tons of fun with you guys right now, but that's because you guys are actually my friends, and like I have real relationships with you guys, at least and you guys are important to me, and I care about you. And that every time I went, I was I'm so happy I'm there. But even when I got home, like, I'm dead. I'm just
You're
dead.
like,
I am such an introvert, and
Yeah.
that mixed with especially when my back pain started, my anxiety issues started creeping up, and and
Mm,
I ended up in the hospital with anxiety attacks.
yeah.
And that kind of social crippling, again, is very cliche to happen in role playing games situations, but I think it's there. I think
Yeah.
people like that are more drawn to it. And what I would say to the people out there is relationships are worth it. Relationships are something that's important, and not only for our own physical and mental health. Study after study has shown that the relationships make a big difference in all those things, but also to the game, also to the role playing game.
yeah,
We get so many better ideas when we can collaborate and bounce
Yeah.
those ideas off of each other, and they're people that we trust. It's not like I remember the story that you were telling, Matthew, a podcast or two ago, that the one guy came in and was kind of rules lawyering you, and you're like, wait, no, that's not, because it wasn't that shared. It wasn't that shared space, and even though those were rules rather than the story, the same thing can kind of happen in the story. And so
Mhm.
when you're with those people in that relationship, or that you have relationships with, you can drive that story home
Yeah. Yeah.
more. And so if that's something that you struggle with out there, just know, one, you're not alone. Two, reach out and people will be happy to help you. And hopefully your gaming group would be happy to help you as well. And just be like, hey, we care about you. You're part of that group because they care about you. So keep at it. And if you got nobody else to reach out to me. You can, right? And I am the most antisocial there is. I will email you back once and then ghost you, but I will try. Dang it, I will try to help you because it is important, and it makes dang good games. It makes dang good
Yeah.
games.
Yeah.
yeah, it really does. Hey, real quick, before we move into our NPC section, I would like you to tell us, you said you had some game stuff that you had created that's on DriveThru RPG. Could you tell us where to find that, what we look for to get to that?
Sure. Yeah. There are kind of two titles that they're for Ironsworn, and then the sci-fi versions, which is Starforged. But most of my stuff is Ironsmith. So if you look up Ironsmith on DriveThru, I've got lots of like kind of single chapter stuff, and then I put it all into one big book. And then I had a second big book of Ironsmith stuff. And then I for the Starforged, I do Starsmith. We were talking about oracles earlier. This whole book is just oracles.
Nice.
This is why I never play sci-fi anymore, because this is too much for me. I made too much for me. But for some people, this is what they want, because it's got planets and what different types of planets would look like, what the first thing you see is. And so that's one of their cautionary tale. I would tell you, you can get out there and find books that are this thick, and you're like, I need 10 of those. Well, then you're going to spend your whole game trying to find the right oracle to roll on at the right moment. So if you want to attempt the solo or the guided stuff, start small. Start with just a single page. This is the only thing you need, and then build as you need it, because there are, again, lots of tools that are out there, including I've got the Ironsmith expanded oracles and Starsmith expanded oracles. If you want to look at those, you're welcome to. And all my stuff you can download for free. It's all pay what you want. So download it for free, see if you like it, see if it's helpful, and if it is, you can come back and throw me a buck or two. So, oh yeah, look at that. And there's my flavor packs where I tried to do incorporate monsters and stuff from different cultures, which was fun.
There it is. So if you're on our YouTube channel right now, Adam has up the actual page on DriveThru RPG, I believe it is, right?
Yeah, and I'll link that too.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
And having those oracles, those tables, it really does kind of throw me back to we've talked about Sentinel's card game on here lots of times. That was like one of the first places I really understood this idea of we're all going to be on the same team, and we're going to let the game kind of be what comes against us. Things are going to come out and we're going to react to that. And this is kind of that RPG area of that.
Yeah.
So,
I love cooperative games.
Yes.
Board games.
My son, my son's 9, and we play kind of simplified versions of RPG games a lot. And he loves the idea that it is not me against him. It's not this competitive thing where there's a winner and a loser, but it's us trying to do this together. And that really is, I think, more than just for my son. I think that's for a lot of us. We haven't even realized that that's like an important part.
Yeah.
And it is. It is. Hey, we're going to run to our NPC. So we do our third segment every time is this NPC that you can use. And we're kind of teasing Adam before we got on here live, because Adam was the one who put kind of the schedule together. Now he randomized a bunch of NPCs, but it seems like 7 of our 9 so far have been seductive women. So we're teasing Adam about like it must be a type.
Yeah.
But today we have Perry Analgram. Perry Analgram, who she's a raven-haired woman in her mid-20s wearing purple silk over bust, a corset with silver stays, black skirt, dark boots, dark hooded cloak. So she's this person with a twinkle in her eye and drives conversations, right? She's polite, but she's brilliant. And she is adept at discussing seemingly unrelated topics. She seeks out people who kind of are intellectual equals with her. And that's kind of her whole thing in this game. You get down to her motivation. It says that she is someone who is seeking like a Sherlock Holmes to her Moriarty, right? So she's this villain who is like super intelligent, and she's kind of looking for someone to be her muse, someone to challenge her. And so she's going to seek out worthy foes. And if her plans go too well, she will kind of deliberately sabotage herself.
I thought that was awesome.
So that there can be a chance that someone can come at her and test her even further. Her personality, she's a braggart who enjoys the game, right? She feeds her foes just enough to remain one step ahead. And she's delightfully satisfied by this idea of having the muse, the person that she puts all this evil together for. Background, once an herbalist, she had a fondness for experimentation that went awry. Her brilliance led to a formula that she experimented with on herself, as so many villains do, right? It not only increased her genius, but her psychosis as well. And so she flutters on the edge of madness, and she's overwhelmed with this kind of goddess complex, this need to be the best. And she has these elixirs and potions that create all manner of effects, from mind-altering suggestive states to paralytic death, during which she taunts her victims incessantly. And so her kind of line is, "Don't worry, the numbness will pass in a moment and give way to a rather unique burning sensation I believe you'll experience and find quite enjoyable." And so I always have a hard time. I was telling Adam, I have a hard time we've done 7 out of 9 females, and I have a hard time like coming up with what's this female going to be like. I have 2 or 3 in my repertoire, and I have a whole lot more males. I don't know what that says about me, but I do like this idea of whether it's female or male, and you could take this and run it either way. But this person who, that Moriarty Sherlock Holmes kind of thing going on there, and you have this person who's always one step ahead but never will just go ahead. It's like that villain who always stops to give you the monologue because they want you to know exactly what it is they did to you before they do it to you. And I think that's a fun kind of character there. What are you guys' thoughts on Perry Analgram?
Yeah, I like her in several ways. I think she could be used as a I don't know the right word, like almost like a secret antagonist for some time, where she's taken note of, and maybe they've had an interaction with her, but then later it's like, oh, there was a note delivered to you by a street urchin. I always have the street urchins. The note's delivered, and the kid doesn't know, but it's some kind of taunting or threatening thing, or something goes wrong in like a mission or a quest that they're doing, and it's like claimed by whatever her pen name is, of this kind of thing. And I think you could play around with that, of just like building that anticipation of, okay, somebody's like messing with us. We can't figure out who. And that's the whole thing. I do think like this is a cool connecting point, one of those like personal things for a specific character, especially in my mind, if they're like a more intelligent, analytical investigator type person, like just go deep into the Sherlock Holmes Moriarty thing of let's do this, and play. I don't know that the barbarian's probably the right person to like bring her into, kind of thing, but to be able to work that. But
So
a
we're
question. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so we're in the, well, we're not in right now, but I have a campaign going called The Dormant Mind. And in there is a sorcerer named Sizen who continually is one step ahead of our people and has had them at his mercy a few times, not killed them, expecting them to die, but they did not die. And he has returned. And I think instead of being like the secret, like you were saying, I would probably play this the complete opposite. I would make this the person who, like, right when they were level 1, comes in, humiliates them, leaves them bound and gagged, laughs and leaves. And then they meet this person again. And it's like, no matter when they meet this person, somehow this person always gets away and pushes it in their face and kind of loves that idea of taunting them and humiliating them over and over again.
I have something that's like in me, and it actually comes from. We're gonna go back to the WoW game at first. There was that initial campaign that I played in. There was a point where I'm gonna forget names here. It's been too long now, but there was a point where somebody we had been with. Eric may be able to pull this out, but because this was before Matthew joined in, but it was. We had been helping. They were a friend. There were things going on. There had been trust built, and we ended up getting betrayed. They kind of like joined with the baddie that we knew was bad, kind of thing. Terrence, I think, was that one, and this guy kind of steps in and does that. I think he had a biblical name, but I can't remember what it is. But so I have that, and I remember I always look back at that, and I'm like. I love that thing where it's like they got away. We got messed over and they got away, and now we're like enraged. Mm-hmm. I always want to bring that in, and it's something, talking to you guys here, like how to do that in a satisfying way. I know I'm moving away from the NPC here, but how to do that in a satisfying way. I always like hesitate because I'm like, I don't always just want to be like, they teleport away. Right. And if I don't they teleport away, it's often somehow these PCs figure out how to run them down and beat them up anyway, and they never get away. It's like I can't make it happen unless I feel like I kind of make it where you never had a chance, kind of thing.
Hand of God on it.
Yeah. So like I'm kind of throwing that into this mix too of if we're kind of going that direction with her. How do you do that in a satisfying way where it's like people don't just feel railroaded in that way,
Yeah. So I think I have an answer for you, or at least one that has worked well. So one of the things that I put in the Ironsmith books was a monster hunting guide. And there were people, the villagers come and say, oh, there's this monster. And you roll on tables, and that's how they describe the monster. But there's a mechanic in there that says, did they see what they think they saw? In other words, what you think is real, is it really real? And then when you finally meet the monster, you're expecting it to look like this, have this ability or whatever. And then you're kind of doing a quick check on each one of those things to say, is that really what's going on? And so I think you could do that with your NPC as well, right? So you've got this big NPC that you want to be this thing that's going to hook them and take them later. And that's kind of your thought. And maybe even their thought, the PC's thought, but it may not be true. It may just be perception. Yeah. And so if things go differently, well, then that wasn't actually the case. This wasn't really the bad guy. There was somebody else behind that, or it was just a one-off and something else is happening, right? Yeah. I think it was Mike Shea who maybe it was I can't remember which podcast I was listening to, but they were talking about if you have a dungeon set in this one castle, and the PCs are like, we're not going to that castle. You don't throw out the dungeon. Wherever they go, that's where the dungeon is.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think you can kind of do the same sort of thing with that NPC to try and build that because you're throwing out those hooks and seeing what sticks. And if they get away like Rollo did, then Rollo becomes a bigger part. And if they do run them down and kill them, okay, well then that wasn't the one. And you might be able to either bring it up later, or maybe they don't want that, or it's not going to fit in this particular story. Right. So I think it's about being flexible in that collaborative storytelling moment.
And I think, like you said, she speaks through the urchin or whatever, but like I would again, this would be a certain type of character, but you have a character who like can amazing skill at charming people and like dominating them. And so these people are doing these things. And every time you think you unmask the person, they kind of come out of it and they're just like some innocent townsperson that she has been dominating and kind of coming. So she's not really there. They can't run her down and beat her. If they run this person down and all of a sudden this person becomes blank and an innocent, and then they're like, oh, I can't kill that person. Right. And then they're constantly searching for it. That could be like a way to do it where you're not having to teleport away kind of stuff.
I like that. And like when I've been a player, I've never personally been like, oh man, like that was lame. Like I'm always like, dang it. Yeah. But I always have that fear, and maybe it's unfounded. Yeah. I think about what you just said, Matthew. There's a Incredibles 2. There's a moment of that where can't remember the name of the actual villain, but they have like a mask on that's basically brainwashing them to do these things. They get taken. They think, oh yeah, we dealt with it, and it's like, no, that actually was just. They were just being used by the puppet master. It was, so that's pretty interesting. But yeah, I just wondered from you guys' perspective in that, because I worry when in those moments, I'm like, I don't want the players to feel
like there was never a chance.
Right. Yeah.
Well, there's got to be a start of a story seed somewhere. So it may as well be that,
that's true.
So you got to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. One other thing I like about this NPC, or that I would use to kind of flesh her out a little bit, is her trophy room. That she's got all these trophies from her previous things that, this person lasted, against me as my Sherlock for 10 times, but then I finally defeated. And it almost becomes like Batman's trophy room, where the things that, he's got Mr. Freeze's gun. He's got all these, Poison Ivy's vine and all this stuff that are a danger to everybody else. So it's not only that she is a villain, but this trophy room that she's got somewhere, if any of those get out. And so now you've got a thieves guild who has heard of her and thinks they have found her trophy room, and they're going to try and get in there. You got to stop them, but you also don't want to alert her to it and start it like this war type thing. Like there's so many places again that if you just let your imagination run with it, that you can go with this NPC. So it's
fun. Like Matthew talked a little while ago about like the what if, what if, and I think that's great to like bring into these things and ask those.
I think that's a great place to go into our haversack of questions, because I know there's one question that deals with, what do you do when it's writer's block? And I feel like we're talking about that. Why don't you pull that question up, Adam? Take us into our haversack of questions today.
So we have several in the haversack. We'll do maybe one or two today here, and jumping into that one. So from Evan, this is his haversack questions batch from October 2nd. So a few days ago, he just asked really quickly here, it's up on the screen. How do you minimize or work through the GM equivalent of writer's block? So it's that moment where you're just stuck. You're like, where are we going? What do you guys do?
So you kind of mentioned mine already, and this is what I would actually do. I sit down with a journal and I write, what if, and then I'll just come up with something crazy and then say, okay, if I follow that out, what if this person, goes outside and falls off of a cliff and, I don't know, that's like ridiculous, but like I'll start, well, what if this person ends up being a goddess and nobody knew it? Okay. Who would she be? And how would that come about? And I'll just I always start with the what if question, because for me, that just allows me to kind of get outside of my head instead of sitting down and saying, okay, the next thing that will happen is this. And the what ifs, the beautiful thing about that is what if we play a session and then I come out of whatever their reaction is. And I'm like, okay, they did this. Well, what if that means, and then it changes, so I'm not locked into like Eric was saying with the encounters. You don't say at the beginning, okay, they're going to go to the thing, they're going to climb up it, they're going to go save the queen, they're going to defeat this and then come back. Well, that's way too much like railroading. So you say, what if they get on top of the glacier and this happens? What if they get to the queen and she pulls the thing away from him and drinks it, kills herself and, sets off this spell? What does that mean? What if, and then I just go that way. And that's the way I get out of writer's block if I have it.
That's good.
I think what I do is I avoid it by not planning. So what I do is really what I did for our Upwind game and for our Ironsworn game, and what I started the or help start the D&D club at school last year and got them going. I played the GM the first session for them for their D&D club, and the only thing I knew is we're going into a temple to find an artifact. That was all I knew going in, and I didn't prepare anything else. And so we got in, and they're like, "What's the first thing you see?" I'm like, "I don't know." And I pulled out my Ironsworn tables, and I rolled on the tables, and I said, "This is what you see." And we ended up with like a skeleton that was a janitor that was mopping around, and they all fought over the janitor's mop, and then like they were just laughing and rolling on the floor, and like that mop became an artifact throughout the rest of their campaign, I think, for the next year. And so to avoid the writer's block, I lift the pressure off myself and go, look, I'm just going to roll, see what comes to mind, and then do the collaboration thing and see what we come up with. And that's what I have found works best for me as a GM. And then I don't have the writer's block. So
see, this is the problem. I have like all these prophecies I always put out with all of these things that have to come together in the end. And I've got like 500 strands I'm like trying to tie together. And meanwhile, Eric's like, let's roll on the table. Boom.
But it doesn't always work. Sometimes it gets pretty bland. There was one time that I ended up like in this lake had got drained or something. And I end up underground, and there's undead and all this stuff. I'm with my dragon companion that I love and care about, and I wanted this story to work. And I started rolling. I'm like, I got nothing. I have no idea what this means, and it killed the whole game. I'm like, I'm done, because I got to the point where the undead that were down there started talking, and I think they started quacking like ducks or something, is what I rolled. And I'm like, this makes no sense. And it's not even funny at this point. Like, I have to stop. So there is a little bit of danger to just roll on the tables. But again, the more you flex your muscles, the better you get at it. So.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I think even when we were talking, bringing those into the prep time for the guided, so not necessarily in the moment. You can do that in the moment, but it's like, man, I do not. Okay, I know what they're doing right now, but I don't know what the next step is. I cannot bring to mind. All my creative energy is gone for the week. Pull up one of those tables, and just start asking those questions. Roll those things. Okay, here's a prompt. What could that be? I think that's stupid. Well, maybe that makes some other thought come up, and I think that can happen. I've noticed with whether it's writing or like trying to get things down on paper for like a teaching I'm doing or for gaming. Sometimes this is going to be simple and maybe too straightforward, but like write something, write anything, and that sometimes is just the little
get draft one down.
Yeah. Like just try to do something. But I lost my last thought on that, but that's a thing where, I feel like sometimes I just have to write something. And even if I scrap that, it can go somewhere, a little bit. But I like that table idea of just even trying to prompt things.
And there are some tables that are specifically designed. So I think the Mythic creators have Adventure Crafter that is about making an adventure that you can roll through. And I know Worlds Without Number is a fantasy game that is made by Kevin Crawford, I believe, who wrote that. And he's very good with all of his tables. And one of the tables that he has is kind of that encounter, adventure / table where you're not only getting what the adventure is a piece at a time, but you're getting motives of the major players and why there is conflict, which is, conflict is what drives all narrative. So we have to have some sort of conflict. And so I think his tables kind of do a good job of fleshing out some of those pieces that can, if you don't take a whole cloth, they're at least very good jump starters.
Yeah. Nice.
And I think there's so many things as a GM. Don't think you have to take anything whole cloth.
Correct.
Always pick and choose. And the part that inspires you, take that, leave the rest.
Yeah.
I don't want to guide everything, but I'm going to pick our next question from the Haversack because it flows right out of this. And it is this one. It's like, how do you set up NPC contacts from a character's past? I've gotten myself a new phrase from today from Eric, and that is prep is play. I love that. That idea just keeps kind of coming back to me and making me happy as I say it. Prep is play. And I think that same thing is something I like to do with characters. So if you guys have like a contact that you told me you want to have, I think one thing I would do to set up that contact in the game from a character's past, I would have you sit down and write me a scene with you and that character from your past. Write me a scene, describe it in good detail. This gets them doing that prep is play thing where they're getting excited about who this person is in their life. And it also gives me enough about that character that then I can, and I always want to, so as a player, when I introduce a contact from my past, I like to really kind of leave an open-ended hook. I'm trying to think. So in our current game that Adam's running, we had my character in the past went to the magic, the Golden Lyceum, is that what it's called? The School of Magic. He and his brother went and they were tested, and I told him that there was a guy who switched me and my brother's results. And I didn't say anything else about it. I just wanted to leave it very open-ended for Adam to do anything he wanted with, okay, who is this guy who switched the results and ended up getting me kind of kicked out and my brother enrolled in this school? And what did that mean and why did it happen? I don't know any of that, but I left it up to Adam. And so I like to tell my characters, write a scene and leave some open-ended things for me. And then that gives me lots of ways to begin to like plot and pull in this person into the current. But it's again that prep is play, because once Adam had me kind of come up with an idea and write a little story about like this person in my past, I got more invested in who that person was and I begin to picture them. And then when he pulls them back in, it's like there's this discovery part of that is more exciting.
Yeah.
How about you guys? How do you bring in contacts from a character's past in games?
Well, I like exactly what you said. See what the player wants. And if you're a GM out there and you have some players who are not comfortable doing that, they're just like, man, I don't think I can write a scene. You probably have somebody at your table who does enjoy that, who would be like, oh man, I would love to write just a little short story about that and see what you think about it. And that can be a way to build relationships too, that they're passing that back and forth on the side. But the other thing is it doesn't always have to be, your contact doesn't always have to be a person in the game. Right. So, back in one of our first WoW games, I think, Matthew, when we had the Tower of Gum at your house, I think I was playing,
Tower of Power.
Yes, the Tower of Power. I was playing the Minotaur priest, Osam Koenig, and he had this book of religious stuff that he couldn't decipher. And so at that point, we were calling those things in your character, we were calling them X factors. Give the GM an X factor that they can take and leave it, like you said, open-ended. And so every once in a while, I would decipher something in that book that would give me some insight into the deity, right? And into my religious philosophy. And I'd be like, oh man, I've been misunderstanding this, or, oh, here's this prophecy or whatever. And so sometimes those contacts and those ways that you can build relationships might even come through in an item. So again, don't limit yourself.
Yeah, and that gave the GM so much in the way of being able to drop little things into your character. I remember that book. Mm-hmm. By the way, clarification, the Tower of Power, we got 1,650 gumballs, and we decided that this was kind of part of our gaming ritual. We would all sit there and just chew gum, and when it got old, we'd take it out and we'd put it on the same plate. We had this tower begin to build of all these old, and that sounds really gross. I know people today would be like, I can't believe you did that. But we built that thing up, and every week that just sat there. I was a bachelor, so my wife didn't care that I had a plate with gum. And I think when I moved out of that place, Adam and I tried to get that plate back. We tried to recover that plate. Yeah. We could not get the gum off that plate. We put it in the freezer and tried to get the gum cold. We took it out and beat the gum against a tree holding on the plate. We finally ended up just throwing the plate away, but Tower of Power lives on in infamy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. I think you guys nailed that. I think it is important though at the beginning, like that's like a session 0 or even like a, outside of that kind of planning. I think it is important to ask for those kind of things and how they're connected to get those stories to build that in. And I think there is something special, and it is like world fleshing and more world you make the world more real to people when those things like do come up. So being able to bring those in is like a really important thing.
And don't be afraid to do it in the moment too. Think about red markets where you have the contacts, that you can spend to try and pull somebody in.
Mm-hmm.
So, it could be need based as well. So at the moment you need this, your characters need this. And so you look at your player and say, you know what, a guy,
Right.
who is it that can help you do this thing? And so it can also be in the moment.
Yeah, that's part of that collaboration that we've been talking about here as you're building trust within the characters. So awesome.
Okay,
Well,
do we want to hit another question, or do we want to save questions?
I think we should save for today. Yeah, that's there's a couple left in there rattling around in the bottom of the haversack, but we'll bring those to the top soon.
Okay, well, guys, I am so glad that Eric got to come on today. I'm glad we could make that
great.
work, and we plan to have him back. But do go to Drive Through RPG, check out Something Smith and Something
Iron
Smith.
Smith and Star Smith.
Yep.
Yes.
Iron Smith and Star Smith. I just remembered the Smiths. Eric Bright on Drive Through RPG. It's some really good stuff. And having those tables can so help with your prep, even if you're doing like a traditional style game. It doesn't just have to be the facilitator guided or the solo play. So, Eric, thanks for coming on today. And I hope you all had a good time, enjoyed some time here with us at the Rise of the GM. All you ascending GMs, remember all of this fun, exciting stuff we talk about. And join us next week as we do whatever it is we're going to do next week.
Thanks for having me.
Good one.